My name is Brett Provenzano, and I am the superintendent of the Fairport Central School District. I'm honored to have you here tonight to talk about a very, very important topic. It's the topic of safety and security in our schools. As a parent of children in the school district, my wife and I have probably the same conversations that you have in your homes. We have the same concerns, the same questions as parents. As an educator, as the proud superintendent of our school district, I can honestly say that safety and security is always at the forefront of what we do. If you're a building principal or an assistant principal, please stand up for a moment, please. I'd like to acknowledge them. We have representation here from most of our schools here tonight. We have Erin Moretter, who's an assistant principal at Northside. We have Carolyn Shea, who's the principal at Northside. We have Meredith Cluse, who's a principal at Brooks Hill. We have Becky Short, who is an assistant principal at Joanna Perrin. We have Pat Groves, the principal at Joanna Perrin. We have Dr. Karen Finger, who is the principal of Dudley School. We have Rich Green, who is the principal of JA. Mr. Robert Clark, principal of the high school, and Mr. David Dunn, who's the principal of Martha Brown. When I say to you that it is a topic of conversation, thank you very much. Thank you. The questions that they think about, the details and the planning that occurs are commonplace. We have a few board members here tonight. We have Ms. Judy O'Leary Sargent. Please stand. Marty Cardona. I think we have Mr. Kevin Glover. I know Damon Buffin's watching this live stream right now. But it's important enough for them to be here, this topic. As parents, as a grandparent, as having children formally in our school district, this is an important topic for our entire board, and they're here as listeners so they can respond as we move along. Oh, and Ms. Joyce Kostick, she always seems to come in at the end. so she doesn't like being introduced. She doesn't like, but Ms. Joyce Kostick, our Board of Education. Sorry, Joyce. When I think of safety in our schools, I certainly don't have all of the answers. And in fact, there's a lot more questions than there are answers. And I was fortunate enough to get a list of questions and meet with parents right after the Parkland tragedy, which all put our focus in on school safety. And they were excellent questions, thoughtful questions, questions for the ages, questions that I think that we might be able to address tonight, some questions that we won't be able to address tonight. But I really want you to know that I don't think we're perfect. I don't think that we have the formula or the secret that will solve all of our problems and questions in this realm. But I can say to you that I'm proud, incredibly proud of our three-pronged approach to safety and security. The first prong is actually the safety and security, the plans, the evacuation plans, the emergency evacuation plans, the hold in place, the lockdown drills. The second component that we are proud of this three-pronged approach is we have a commitment to creating connections in nurturing environments that are healthy, that produce safe environments for learning and caring. We have an incredible process, a systematic process, and we're going to learn about that tonight as well, on how we try to maximize connections in everything that we do, because we know if a student is connected to their schools, that gives them an opportunity to be safe and make healthy life choices. The third thing, which I am very proud of, which we'll be talking more about, is our approach to behavior intervention. And we think that this is a proactive way to manage and support issues before they become issues. And we're working with partners, whom we will meet tonight, on this initiative. It's a new initiative that really completes our process on how do we find the students before it becomes an issue. So it's a preventative, proactive, and balanced approach, and a restorative approach that is proven to be an important factor in how you support safety and security in your building. So it's not about the technology, it's not about the widgets, it's not about, securing entrances, and that's might be a component of it, but it's much more elaborate. And tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about that. We have the opportunity to hear from some very special guests tonight. We have Mark Concordia from Roberts Wesleyan. You can stand, please. And we have Chief Sam Farina from the Fairport Village Police. They will be our two guest speakers who we'll be talking to you in a little bit. We also have Captain Sam Bell from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. And I think that they stand here tonight as partners. These partners have been with us for a number of years. I've been having conversations with Chief Farina for for the past 3 years, I should say, on the health, safety, and wellness of our students, how they could be a presence in our schools, a proactive, positive presence. Captain Bell, our relationship is new, but the Monroe County Sheriff and the Fairport Central School District has had a long-standing positive relationship where they are called on site to support our schools. So the partnerships are already established. That should make you feel comfortable. That makes me feel comfortable because we're not inventing this as we go along. It's intentional, and we look forward to sharing with you what we're going to be talking about when it comes to safety and security in our schools. I would have to say that this year we have 3 new safety coordinators, and this team is an incredible trio who will make it their priority to be good listeners and to be responsive as we talk safety and security. We have Becky Short, who's, again, the principal at JP. We have Deborah Miles, who's the Student Services Director for the district. And we have Susan Waltz, who's the Special Areas Director for the district. They come with them within each one of their realms. They have a niche of expertise that will serve our district well. I would like to introduce right now Professor Mark Concordia from Roberts Wesleyan. Mark is an experienced counterterrorism criminal investigator and a certified threat manager. He is currently sitting on the faculty as an associate professor of criminal justice at Roberts Wesleyan College. He served as the Director of Homeland Security and Applied Intelligence, Director of the Criminal Justice Administration for Adult Degree Program, and founder of the Justice and Security Institute. Mr. Concordia is an accomplished detective, an FBI investigation instructor, lecturer, and recognized expert in the field of counterterrorism and police investigations. Of his many certifications, he holds professional accreditation in threat assessment. He's a licensed federal investigator and a threat manager. I am proud and happy to recognize Mr. Mark Concordia.
Thank you, Brett, for that very kind introduction. I don't like standing at a podium, so it's going to be hard for me. If I wander, can you hear me? Probably. Can I wander? Is that okay? Not too far. Okay. I'll stay at the podium. It's going to be tough. All right, so tonight I'm going to speak to you from my heart. Okay, I'm going to speak to you about passion. I'm going to speak to you about hope. I'm going to speak to you about commitment. Passion for our kids, passion for our community, and the safety of all, even those who are at risk. Our commitment to our kids, our commitment to security and wellness for our community, and hope that in this time of absolute sorrow and tragedy that we're constantly facing, that there is a better way. that together as a connected community, both from a systems approach and as members of the Fairport School District and the Fairport community, that we can come together and we can do it better, okay? In a balanced approach, as Superintendent Provenzano stated. We're going to talk to you again about commitment. Commitment not only from your police chief, but your school district, the sheriff's department, commitment that they put into this. And I'm going to tell you, we began this initiative before Parkland. This was not something that we did in response to. We were already engaged, I think, on our third training day when the tragedy in Florida occurred. And it unfortunately served as another example. But we're going to talk about all of this tonight. And I'm going to hopefully educate you a bit on what a behavioral intervention team with a threat assessment component really is about. We're not going to get into all the scholarship and science, but we're going to leave you with an understanding of what we're trying to do here, exactly as the superintendent stated. Prevention, not prosecution. Prevention, not prediction. All right, so I'm going to begin with a little bit of my passion. I also want to recognize Dr. Robert Weissman, who's behind me, of the University of Rochester. He's my co-trainer, my partner in this, probably my psychiatrist sometimes too, because I talked to him about a lot of my struggles and along the way with this passion. So my passion originated almost a little over 8 years ago on February 12, 2010. I was home with my family. I had, at that time, a 7-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old daughter. We were having dinner. It was a cold night. I remember just like it was yesterday, big snowflakes outside. You know, one of those real crisp nights where the snowflakes were huge. Having dinner with family and friends, and my phone rang. So when you're a detective on call, you don't like your phone to ring at, 8 o'clock at night. So I answered the phone, and it was, at the time, Chief Phelan. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was actually Captain Phelan at the time. Sheriff Baxter was just the newly appointed chief of Greece at that time. And they said, Mark, could you come in? We need some help. We just had a murder-suicide. So I said, okay. So I got in my car, left my family, drove to Greece, and the location was a small yellow house directly across the street from the police department, a house that I drove by hundreds of times, a house that I was called to 7 years earlier for a male who was depressed, who was suicidal and acting recklessly, a male who I determined to be suffering from a mental illness at that time, a male who was also exhibiting signs of danger to himself or others. So we involuntarily transported him to a psych ED. That was 7 years prior. But that night when I arrived, I stood in the house of a situation where a man took the life of his 7-year-old child and then took his own life. That's my passion. His name is Hunter, and I spoke to his mother earlier today, and she's so excited that what we've talked about over these years is starting to really gain a lot of momentum in our area. And this is the source of my passion and the focus of what we're doing. And when that occurred, I questioned myself every day afterwards. Did I do enough 7 years ago? Did the systems do enough? And I think I'm not too proud to say that our systems failed. I mean, we had a 7-year journey to where a father thought he had no other choice but to take his son's life in his own. So that's my passion. All right. So enough is enough, right? I think we've said this, we've heard this, and I think we can all agree. We are faced with, in the last 2 decades, a time where we have what we call in the business cultural scripts. Scripts, prescriptions that point a way for violence to individuals who are suffering from multiple different problems in their lives. So frustrated, so troubled that they feel that violence is an acceptable resolution to their grievances or to their pain. I'm not going to go over the numbers, but they're there. And I think we can say enough is enough. But we've heard this before, and what happens, and this was my experience 3 years ago after Sandy Hook, when I said, okay, enough is enough. How could, when we lost those babies, I started an initiative at Roberts Wesleyan College where I brought together stakeholders from K through 12, the community, law enforcement, mental health, and our corporate America to say, what are we doing? What is everybody doing? And I'm here to tell, everybody is doing something. Fairport's been doing something for a long time. They've had strategies in place to try to counter and protect your kids. But what I realized, it was very fragmented still. So 3 years ago, after Sandy Hook, this was the debate, guns and mental health. And this debate can be extremely polarizing, but what's more important is it's extremely paralyzing. So here's a quote from a police chief. Where's the public outcry? Where are the marches on our state capitals, college campuses, or Washington, D.C. to demand relief from the senseless carnage of our sons and daughters? If there is one legacy every generation owes to the next, it is to protect their safety and security. And we, as a nation and as a people, have failed our children miserably. That was 1999. Okay? That was after Columbine. This debate has been going on for 2 decades between mental health and gun control. But there is a better way. There is a middle ground, which is a proactive, preventative strategy that is in place to identify early warning signs, to have the community in its entirety come alongside that person with a restorative philosophy to help take that person, that at-risk individual, off a pathway to violence. There is a better way. So I had this focus group come together, and when I realized they're still somewhat fragmented, I continued my journey to educate myself on what are better models out there. I traveled across the country to Oregon. I spent a week with their threat assessment team, the Salem-Keizer Mid-Valley Threat Assessment Team. I attended their training and I watched how they did their work and saw how comprehensive it was and how committed the entire community was to it. I joined an organization called the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. Didn't even know that existed until I began to look. And then I found a whole community of individuals, both mental health, law enforcement, higher ed, K through 12, who thought the same thing. There is a better way. It's not a new phenomenon, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to educate you a little bit on what threat assessment or behavioral intervention with a threat assessment component actually is. It is a balanced approach. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. This just occurred on March 8th. Now, I don't know the details of the case, but I do know that zero tolerance sometimes can be an overreaction in times of stress and anxiety and fear. In New Jersey, 7 intermediate school students, 4 11-year-olds, and 3 12-year-olds were arrested for making terroristic threats. They simply said that they were going to be the next school shooter, and they were arrested. They were pulled off their buses. There is a better way, okay? School, community, police, and mental health coming together for a more balanced approach. Prevention, not prediction. Threat assessment or behavioral intervention is not based on profiling. It's not based on taking a static environment and trying to predict who may be violent or who may be risk. That's not what we do. What we do is react to a situation where someone presents as a threat of a certain type of violence that I'm going to explain to you. It's restorative. What does that mean? That means if you don't balance the needs of your community, safety needs with your community, with the wellness needs of the individual presenting as a problem or a threat, you're not as safe. You have to balance both of those needs, and you have to help that at-risk person come off of that thought process or that thinking pattern, or what we call the pathway to violence. Now, what I'm going to do is show you a little bit of the recommendations and justifications that's out there already. It's been out there for decades surrounding threat assessment or behavioral intervention. This is a finding of the Safe School Initiative, okay? threat assessment teams. This is an innovative program, if not the first of its kind in this country, has been considered by the United States Department of Education as a model program for every school district in the nation. That was 1999 also. Recommendations from Columbine, recommendations from Virginia Tech, okay? Threat assessment teams should be established in every Colorado high school. In Oregon, it's a law. Final report of the Sandy Hook, same thing, threat assessment teams. After Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High, threat assessment teams will be stood up in every, which is also a behavioral intervention team, will be stood up in every high school and middle school in Florida. The difference here, though, folks, is that we're not waiting for an event to occur in our area, in our district, in Fairport. Again, the commitment to safety, this is not an easy task. The comprehensive model that we trained on for 3 days, going to be on 4, and continuing, it just doesn't end, is an absolute commitment by your police department and your school to doing the best that they can to balance the wellness needs of its students and the safety needs of the community and of itself. Now, threat assessment originated really probably almost 3 decades ago or more by the U.S. Secret Service. The Exceptional Case Study Report was the foundational document from the U.S. Secret Service. So what that was they, obviously the Secret Service was charged with protecting politicians and government officials. So they decided to look back at successful assassinations or thwarted assassinations where there was actual attempts. Not to look at so much about what type of individual was involved in this, although that was part of it, but more importantly what they focused on was that there really is no profile. There is no profile of someone that did an act like that, but what was consistent was their behavior, okay? So this is where threat assessment actually began. And what threat assessment is a fact-based, assessment means facts. It's an investigation that takes into account a person's patterns of thinking, which can manifest in their communications, plus, and this is the most important thing, plus their behavior. What are they doing to advance the threat? There's so many times where individuals may make a threat, but they actually don't pose a danger. Now, you could take maybe those 7 students in New Jersey where you have an 11-year-old that says, I'm going to be the next school shooter. What capacity do they have to do that? What behavior is involved? Is there access to weapons? Are they moving along a pathway to violence? Is the behavior consistent with the communication? In the threat assessment world, in the behavior intervention world, that equals more of a risk of danger. This is the fundamental concepts of threat assessment. Fact-based, balanced assessment, reassessment, understand the patterns of thinking, look at the behavior, and determine whether or not there's really a threat. When we talk about violence, though, we're talking about a certain type of violence. When you talk about a behavioral intervention team with a threat assessment component, you're not talking about what we call affective violence or emotional violence, spontaneous, where you may see a lot of times in schools or in our community where 2 individuals get in a heated argument and they have a fight. That's not what threat assessment or behavioral intervention is focused on. What it's focused on is what we call predatory violence, intended violence. And it manifests in several forms. Counterterrorism is one form of predatory or targeted violence. Workplace shootings, mass shootings, school shootings, even some forms of domestic violence or intimate partner homicide can also be predatory or targeted. What we've learned, and this is where we have the greatest source of our intervention and assessment, is that violence, this specific type of violence, is a process. You don't just wake up one day and decide to join ISIS. You don't just wake up one day and decide, this is the time that I'm going to do a mass killing event. It is a process. And because it's a process, and it's a discernible process, there are opportunities to intervene if you recognize the warning signs. That's what threat assessment, behavioral intervention is focused on, those warning signs, when they present. And the key concept here is nobody really goes along this process in a vacuum. There's concepts, well, we talked about them over and over, leakage, and what we have in social media today. That's why it's so important for us as parents and us as friends and colleagues and peers and coworkers to understand what's happening in our loved ones' lives. What's going on with our children on social media? What are they saying? What are they posting? What's on their blogs? You would be amazed if you understood the subculture that's out there surrounding these acts of mass violence that our kids are subscribing to. They're idolizing past, we call it fixation. They're idolizing past shooters. There's entire communities that are out there that idolize some of these individuals. That's all happening in our kids' rooms and in the basements and at the keystroke or stroke of a mouse click. We talked about this in our, in our training, where years and years ago, when I was a child, I was never exposed to this type of desensitization towards this type of violence. Now today, our children can watch unspeakable acts of barbarism on the internet just by a click. We have to be engaged in what our kids and what our friends and our family and our peers are doing. So it doesn't occur in a vacuum. And if you have a connected community where we create an environment of shared responsibility, not only between the school district, the police departments, our mental health clinicians, but our parents, our coworkers, our peers, our sisters, our brothers, our cousins, where everybody is engaged. Nobody suffers alone is some of the keys. Shared responsibility, turning what we call bystanders into upstanders. Because, remember, this is a process. Nobody just wakes up and decides to do an act of targeted violence. There's many challenges, though, that we face, and I found this over the last 3 years, and it's not challenges that are unique to Fairport or Monroe County, it's across the country. And that's the bifurcated systems, right? We all do our best in the systems in which we run, and there's others out there in our community, like in law enforcement or like with our mental health, that are dedicated to connecting those systems. But until you have a really formalized methodology to do that, there's always going to be cracks. So our bifurcated systems, which creates silos of information. That's one of the fundamental points of what a threat assessment or behavioral intervention team does, which is multidisciplinary. You have law enforcement, school, mental health, other advocacy groups, or any stakeholders that you can think of are part of a behavioral intervention team at different stages along the way. And so there are no longer silos. There are no longer bunkers. What we do is we break down those silos and we get out of our bunkers and we share information in a trusting manner that's designed to come up with the best intervention and case management strategies for those who we're concerned with. And knowledge and awareness. I can't tell you, there's a lot of different entities across Monroe County and across the country that say that we're doing threat assessment. But when you really look at the models that are out there and the fundamental principles and recommendations, it's really hard to do threat assessment the right way because there's a continued need for reassessment and case management. But the Salem-Kaiser model, the Mid-Valley model that we based the behavioral intervention team off of, creates an environment where there's sustained commitment. And so building awareness in our community of really what threat assessment is across systems and having everybody understand the language behind behavioral intervention and threat assessment has been one of the challenges that we faced. So I only have a couple of more minutes, but as Superintendent Provenzano pointed out earlier, the key is a connected community, okay? Nobody eats alone. Nobody suffers alone. Our police departments are part of the community. They're part of the school district. Our parents, our loved ones were engaged. We were recognizing when people are hurting, and we have a system. Now you have a system that is balanced and that is there for you to bring your concerns to. And that's part of what we're going to continue to talk about, is rolling this out community-wide so the community understands that there is this type of intervention team at Fairport that's ready and willing to have a balanced, restorative approach. So your school district, members of the professional education community and the mental health community, myself and others, the chief, the sheriff, they're all committed to this. I'm going to ask you all now, how many, I assume that you're all parents or at least members of, you have parents or kids that go to the school district, correct? Do we have any students here? 2, 3, okay. I want you to raise your hand, and I want you to stand up if you're willing to commit to be a upstander and not a bystander. You're committing to safety for your school. Stand up if you're committing for that. Parents, okay? Parents, stand up. I want you to stand up and make your commitment that nobody suffers alone. Police department, everybody in this room, this is Fairport. I envy Fairport. I want to be part of this community because this is what it's about, getting everybody together for the safety, a balanced approach, and what's best for your community. And I applaud the commitment of your police chief, of the sheriff's department, and of your entire school district, because you are the first in Monroe County to adopt this type of comprehensive targeted violence prevention program that is designed to meet the needs of the at-risk individual and the needs of your community. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you very much, Mark. Powerful statements, powerful concepts that embodies actually the heart of who we are as a school district. And you've been with us for a short while, and you get a sense of the one word that describes what we do best, and that's love. And taking care of each other, making sure that we're committed to the very best for our children, for our staff, and for our community as a whole. So thank you for that powerful presentation, and we look forward to our continued commitments. As we talk budgets and priorities, this is a priority. I would like to introduce Chief Sam Farina from the Fairport Village Police Department. Chief Farina is currently the Chief of Police for the Village of Fairport and has been in that position since September of 2014. Prior to that, Chief Farina was the Deputy Chief of Operations for the Rochester Police Department from 2008 to 2011, a commander with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office for 19 years, and a former special agent with the FBI assigned to the Washington Field Office. Chief Farina has a bachelor's degree in criminology from Niagara University, a master's degree in criminal justice administration from Niagara University, and a master's degree in forensic psychology from Walden University. In addition to 30 years of law enforcement experience, Chief Farina is a certified hostage negotiator and currently the president of the New York Association for Hostage Negotiators. Farina also contracts with the U.S. Department of State to provide training, consulting, and instruction to foreign governments on crisis negotiations and crisis management. What's not in here is he's an incredible partner. What's not in here is the countless number of times that he would call me at any different time, because that's our deal. Or the times that we meet on a monthly basis, to the best that our schedules allow that to happen, to talk about our community and how we could provide the very best to our children. And I'm grateful for that partnership, and I look forward to hearing from Chief Farina.
Thank you, Superintendent. I appreciate that wonderful intro. I just want to start by saying, as the police chief, one of my primary responsibilities is the safety and security of your children in school and out of school. If we look at it, our children are our best commodity, right? And I say that because I have a 3-year-old child, so I'm well invested in this. Usually I get some snickers and laughs when I say that. You're awfully old to have a 3-year-old, right? But that's what I say as being the most important thing, and that is what charges me each day to go out and to work in this community, is to make sure your kids that go to the Fairport School District are well taken care of, and they are safe and secure in the schools. And I can say unequivocally that that is the case, having worked with the fine professionals here in the Fairport School District, the superintendent, the principals, the assistant principals, the folks involved in mental health and student well-being. Each day have that same passion that I share. So what does that mean as far as why is law enforcement involved in schools? Why is there a need for us to be there? And Mark alluded to this as the restorative side of what we're looking to do. We're not there to police. We're not there to enforce law. We're not there to let your kids be part of the criminal justice system. To the contrary, we're there as a presence. We're there for community policing. We're there to show that we are a partner in this community and to ensure that the safety and security is taken care of each day at each building. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, prior to the events that took place in Florida, we were in the schools on a daily basis in the village. As a matter of routine, a matter of protocol, for the past 2.5 years that I've been the police chief, it's been ordered that our folks go in on a daily basis and walk to schools and just get to meet the kids in the schools and be present. And I know for a fact that that goes on as well with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. The current sheriff has directed his folks to do the same thing, so they're out there doing the same things that we do on a daily basis. We also are very much involved in the daily operation with the school district, talking about safety and security, talking about protocols and what we can do to assist in any way, help make the community much safer in the schools. So that goes on as just a matter of daily interaction. And I got to say, with my experience in law enforcement, Fairport is truly unique. I have some great partners here in the school district that we work with day in and day out, and it's seamless. The superintendent may call me on a daily basis as well, one of the principals, and we deal with any crisis or situation that comes up quickly, and it's in a restorative sense. We don't look to try to bring down law enforcement or policing as a way to resolve every single crisis. So that's our contribution to the school district. That's our commitment to the school district, and I know that with this new behavioral intervention team that's being created, it's going to be that much better, that's more formalized, and we're looking very much forward to that being a part of the Fairport way and making this district as safe as it can be. And Mark mentioned it, this is the first school district that will have this type of protocol. So again, Fairport is the progressive leader in this type of format, and we're looking forward to being part of that. So with that, I do want to conclude by saying we're not operating in a vacuum here in a silo, as Mark pointed out as well. We want to do this together, and the parents and the students are just as responsible for safety and security of the schools as the police, security, mental health, all the other community partners that may be involved. And in this time with what we're seeing, what happened in Florida, and the statistics show, which is very telling, 85% of the time we've had a school shooting, there has been some type of indicator that it was going to happen. So this reactive approach that law enforcement has really been involved in is now changing. The paradigm shift has changed now to a preventative way. If we're seeing 85% of the time in the past that there's been indicators that this is going to happen, we need to react to that. Because if we're in an active shooter scenario, we're acting tactically to try to resolve it, it's too late, right? We've gone too far, it's been too late. Although if it has to happen, I can reassure you that we are trained, we are ready to go, we're equipped, and with resolve, we will take care of that situation. And I will say, and I don't know the circumstances of what happened in Florida, why the officer did or did not react the way he did, but I can assure you, without question, from the Fairport Police standpoint, and I know the Sheriff's Office is the same way, that we will react quickly, without hesitation, and with resolve if we ever have to address a crisis situation. So giving that, please be that partner. If you see something, say something, something suspicious is brought to your attention online, through social media, let us know. Let the school know. We will investigate it, and now we have a comprehensive way of dealing with this so we can vet that information without jumping to conclusions, without the knee-jerk reaction, and do it in a way that we can balance those rights of the student, the school, law enforcement, the community, and ensure that we do it correctly. And that's what I ask of the parents, that's what I ask of the students, and I know that behind me, the folks from the Fairport School District are truly committed to the well-being, safety, and security of your children on a daily basis, as we are in law enforcement. So thank you for your time, and I will ask Captain Bell if you want to say a few words. I don't want to steal your thunder or steal the show. He's bigger than I am, and I don't want him to take me out.
Thank you. You know, I can come up here and I can echo what the chief said, but he said it well. It's about prevention, building partnerships, and being committed to the district and to the community. I'm newly assigned out here to the A zone, and since day one, the Fairport School District has had me involved in the development of this behavioral intervention team. They're very aggressive as far as, you know, being committed to this. As it's been mentioned previously, this Fairport district is the first in the county to do this behavioral intervention team. They also have supplied us with key fobs for all our cars for the deputies, which is the first of any school district on the east side of the county. So they're well vested in this. We are committed as well, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Captain Bell, thank you very much. And like I said, it's reassuring to have incredible partners like the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and our village police and our partners from Roberts Westling and U of R as well. It makes us all better and feel good about the work that we're doing when you have research-based approaches, best practices to making sure that we're taking care of our most important and prized commodity or possession, our loves, our children. I know there's many teachers and staff members. I want to ask you to stand up out there. I know that you're out there. I see that you're out there, and I know that this is a priority for you. And we're happy that you're here investing in this because it's something that you're on the front lines of every single day. And I don't want to come across ever like I'm saying in the beginning that we have this all figured out and we have all the answers, because you have questions to scenarios. We can continue to learn from you. With that, I just want to keep that in mind, that this is a commitment, and we're looking forward to continuing with these conversations. And I would like for us now to bring up Becky Short, who is on the safety and security team, emergency response team for the district, who will talk a little bit about the emergency processes that we have in place, just to give you an overview. Ms. Short, Becky Short.
Thank you. I just want to take a little bit of time to provide you, as Brett said, with a bit of an overview of what our emergency response is like. Excuse me. We do have a comprehensive plan here on student safety, and that includes, again, as Brett has mentioned, intentional planning, the development of our threat assessment protocol, and Deb Miles is going to provide a little bit more information regarding that, as well as our emergency response plans. So our emergency management is a very tiered thing. We look to prevention, and prevention in a variety of different ways. Our behavioral team is going to look to prevention in terms of students' mental health, but also we look to prevention in terms of what do our facilities look like and what do we have available to make sure that threats are at bay. We are very thoughtful planners, and we have prepared to handle an emergency. We do not do this in isolation. We do this in teams. We have district teams, and we have emergency, our ERT, our emergency response teams, I'm sorry that my back is to you, that meets monthly to discuss this. We rehearse our plans, and this is with students and staff. A lot of the plans that we have in a very skeleton version is available on our website, and I'm not sure if you've gone there to see it, but it is something that parents have asked for, and it is available in, I think, a 34-page document, but then sort of a parent version that you can look at, which is a 2-page document to get an idea of the plans that we practice in our schools. We work with our emergency responders to make sure that we're able to respond safely to our emergencies. We have plans in place for recovery, so if there were an emergency at one of the schools, we have plans in place to reunify parents and students, and those plans are split up for each of our different schools. And we assess what we're doing. We have an ongoing review of our systems to make sure that we're always doing the best that we can do. So our emergency plans are reviewed annually by the Fairport Central School District Emergency Response Team. These plans are submitted to New York State. It's required for us to submit these to New York State annually. We share these plans with our emergency responders. So all of the emergency responders have PDF versions of the plans. They have maps of all of the schools and have a very good overview as to what we do in an emergency situation. These plans are taught to students and staff, and we practice these specifically during the Fairport Central School District Safety Week, but also ongoing throughout the year. This is required by New York State, but having been in other districts, I know that Fairport goes above and beyond with this portion of it. The shelter in place, hold in place, evacuate and relocate, lockdown and lockout are drills, if you are parents, that you may have heard your children talk about. And if you hear that we're doing some of these drills, do not be alarmed. A hold in place is something that we do quite often if there's somebody who is infirm and needs to leave the building and we don't want to draw attention to them. So if there is an emergency going on in the building and it is something that is a heightened thing, your administrator will reach out to you and let you know. But if you want further information, because some people had requested information so that they could talk to their kids about this, so that they could rehearse it, so that they could be better prepared. You can find this on the district website under safety, and there are 2 PDFs available for you, so you can get a lot more information. And we want to let you know that we've built these plans with consistent language, and we think this is really important as students transition from building to building. Having traveling teachers who travel between buildings, you shouldn't need to know some terms for one building and a different set of terms for another building. Substitute teachers who are in different buildings in the district, our support staff, and then our district level administrators. They shouldn't need to know what the plan is for certain buildings. It's consistent throughout. So that's a general overview for you. And again, we have a lot more information on our website, so I do invite you to check that out. Deb Miles is going to share with you PBIS.
Okay, so this portion of it really starts to speak to the mental health of our students. So that could be a whole presentation, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm actually very fortunate to be the Director of Student Services in Fairport because we have a Board of Education and a superintendent that places this as an extreme high priority. And we spend a lot of time at our administrative cabinets and through our trainings really working and focusing on this and focusing on how we're supporting our students. And as parents, you should be comforted in the fact that we also, in comparison to many districts on the east side or across the county, have a very well-staffed mental health department in terms of school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers. We have behavioral specialists. And I would be remiss to stand up here and not talk about our first partnership that we established with the University of Rochester Medical Center and Strong Behavioral Health, and that we have doctoral level psychologists in our district every day of the week supporting our students and supporting our families. We have actually a certified licensed Office of Mental Health clinic in our district in one of our school buildings, and that is incredibly unique across New York State. So you should feel good about the fact that we truly prioritize how we take care of our students and how we want to better serve you as families, because it is a partnership, and we know that when you're going through those challenges with your students, your children, that is a very difficult thing, and there are a lot of ups and there are a lot of downs, and there are a lot of processes in time to get connected to community agencies. So the more that we can do to help you, we feel very strongly that that is our job. So that said, we have a few things that we're doing also within the district to really teach your children how we expect them to behave and how we want to be treated by others, and then we expect them to treat others. And a lot of that work is done through PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. This is not a new thing. This is actually a research-based program that really introduces, models, reinforces positive social behavior. It's explicit teaching to your students about how to conduct themselves in the school setting and with their peer relationships. We teach the expectations and reward the behavior in an effort to be preventative, to really be able to model and get what we want out of students, to have obviously a positive environment for students to come to school. If we sit back and wait for things to go wrong, then we feel like we've missed our opportunity. There's always a teaching component to that, for sure, but if we can do more up front, we feel like we get more out of that, of course, and your children have a better experience in school. So obviously the PBIS is really meant to address the climate of the school environment, and that, I think, is the crux of what is really going on in today's society, and kids needing to be better at building relationships and kind of stepping out of the technology and having eye contact with each other and communication with each other. So we're getting away from it, and we need to get back to it. And some of these programs and activities help them. And I'm sure they're coming home talking a little bit about all the fun activities, especially at the elementary level, in terms of what that looks like in school. So just to give you a picture of where we're at with that, it can take upwards of 10 years to really fully establish a PBIS program in a district, especially a district this size. And so this is really part of our response to intervention. We focused in Fairport a lot on academics in the past, and we're now focusing through RTI on the behavioral aspect of that. Our elementary buildings are in their third year of PBIS, meaning that they have that they're at the point where they're continuing their training, and they're at the tier 1, tier 2 stages of really implementing their lessons, holding lots of fun activities and assemblies. The kids are understanding the language is consistent across all classrooms, and they're speaking the language. They're coming to the office and saying, you know, I need a mindful minute, I need a break, I need a, you know, and that's great, as opposed to, you know, the temper tantrum that we could see. Middle schools are in their second year. They're implementing the tier 1 strategies, building-wide programming. And our high schools are in the year 1 of the training. So right now they spend the whole year really trying to understand where they are through the tiered fidelity inventory, and then also developing their matrix, which is really their behavioral expectations at that level. All of this is rolled out, of course, in like a developmentally appropriate manner for their age groups. So you heard a lot about our behavior intervention team. Another proud moment. So I think Sam Farina, really, Chief Farina, and Brett Provenzano came to me and said, what do you think? And so we immediately jumped in, and we haven't looked back. So this is really outstanding. I know Mark talked about it quite a bit. Sam has talked about it. We have moved forward. We've spent 14 hours of training. Our last training is coming up this Friday, where we really work on the protocol of what it looks like in the buildings. And we're excited about this because, again, this draws in all of the community agencies that we need to partner with to make sure that we're reaching our students in the way that matters. Let's see, the team is really designed, as they've said, to be preventative. We want to make sure that when we're hearing things or seeing things, and when we know, one of the biggest things about Fairport is really just the relationships that we build with students. And when we build those relationships with students, we recognize when something isn't going well. And it's just really having that relationship so that you can reach out to a student and they can feel good about confiding in you. We also know that social media is probably the #1 way that kids are communicating to their peers, to social groups, to various people that they connect with. And so, again, we just keep reaffirming to you that knowing what's going on in your child's life, understanding what they're doing with their social media, with their technology, is critical. And then when you hear something, see something, your students, have the conversation ahead of time. If they're seeing something that doesn't look right, they should come to you. They should feel good about coming to you. You can reach out to any building administrator or any school counselor to let us know what your concern is. I would say pick up the phone and call. If it's that important, pick up the phone and call. Email can be a delayed response. It takes a little while to get through a lot of emails in a district this size, and we would not want to have it lost in the shuffle that way. So if you do hear something, this team is going to be in place. It's going to start at the building level, and then when the building team, the site team, determines that it's a valid threat, it's something that we need to look into, then it moves up to the level 1 team, of which will involve the village police, the sheriff's department, district level personnel. And then as we invite the building team to that team and work through the process and determine the severeness of the threat, we can then also move it up to the level 2 team, which brings in Kim Butler, the Office of Mental Health, Dr. Weissman and Mark, if needed, to help determine what our next steps are. I can tell you already, I know this is going to be successful in this district because of the community that we're in. We're running a case already that we haven't even fully established a team, and Farina has been integral in supporting, and same with Captain Bell, in supporting a situation that is nothing critical. It's just we're practicing, and the family has been very supportive in terms of sharing information and just having a really proactive relationship. So it's already working. It's been a huge benefit. So we want to just continue that partnership. And then just to give you a sense of what are the trainings, what things sort of happen in Fairport to make sure that we are in a good place. So we have therapeutic behavior management is a training that we have 10 actual trainers in the district that are turnnkeying this training, and this is all on de-escalation, emotional regulation, determining the difference between a deliberate behavior and emotional behavior, and what are appropriate responses. So we've had all of our administrators, our mental health staff, our sentries, and now our paras are starting to get trained in this, and so it's been very effective in that regard too. We offered mental health training on opening day because understanding mental health and the signs and symptoms absolutely are critical for our teachers and our staff to be aware of what we're seeing in students. Let's see, the threat assessment training we've talked about a lot tonight. We, of course, do safety training on a regular basis. We start our school years with it. We review protocols that Becky had shared with you. And we do tabletop drills at the building level as well as the district level throughout the year. We have over 60 staff in the district, a combination of teachers and administrators trained in trauma, illness, and grief. So again, just another way of providing our staff and equipping our staff with a way to handle any kind of situation that might be going on with our families, if we've lost a loved one, if we've had an accident, something to that regard, and supporting our kids so that they can grieve appropriately and effectively. Mental health first aid is just another type of training that teaches staff how to address some of the symptoms you might see in the classroom, how to recognize symptoms of mental illness, and so we've had a number of courses offered for that. So this portion concludes our presentation, and I know we have a panel of experts that's going to be part of the presentation tonight, and I think, Brett, you wanted to introduce them? So thank you very much.
Our safety coordinators, Susan Waltz, Deborah Miles, and Becky Short, are focused, highly intentional, and reflective on our processes, and I'm looking forward to the next several months where we continue to have conversations. We meet monthly. The principals meet bi-weekly or as needed to talk about safety through a systematic process. So again, this is something that's a priority and that's continually on our mind. We have a panel of experts that we're going to bring forward, and I'm going to introduce them, and then I'm going to have Mr. Kevin Henschen come up and talk to you a little bit about the cards that you have and how we're going to collect them. So I'm going to ask Mr. Robert Clark, principal of Fairport High School, please come forward. Mr. David Dunn, principal of Martha Brown. Mr. Richard Green, principal of Jefferson Ave School. Dr. Karen Finger, principal of Dudley School. Dr. Robert Weissman from the University of Rochester Medical Center. Mark Concordia, our keynote address, and represents Roberts Westland. Kim Butler from the Office of Mental Health. Chief Sam Farina from the Fairport Police Department. And Captain Sam Bell from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. We're going to invite Mr. Henson up. Mr. Henson is our Director of Professional Development and an all-around great guy who does so many things for our district. So, Mr. Henson, you want to explain?
Good evening, everybody. In order to be consistent and so that everybody hears the questions for our panel this evening, what we've asked you to do is, if you have a card and you have a question written out already, some of you may have and already are ready for that to be collected, we would ask for you just to simply raise your card up. Either myself or Susan Waltz will come around and collect that, and then I will read the question from up here so that everybody can hear it, and then we will figure out who best on the panel. We can do this interactively. If there's someone who is passionate on the panel about answering the question, raise your hand, or in some cases, it may be a very directed question that we have for a specific person. So again, if you want to take a moment right now to write a question down, please do so. And we have Susan also, who is walking around right now collecting those. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started. We do have some questions already. The first question for our panel is, do you change up the conditions during a lockdown so that all staff, including administrators, practice for a variety of scenarios? So that's more for, I believe, our principals. If anybody would like to jump in again. Do you need me to read that question again?
No, I think I heard it.
Okay, just for the benefit of everybody here, though. So it's, do you change up the conditions during a lockdown? That is one of the drills that's practiced in the schools for those of you who may not be familiar with it, so that all staff, including administrators, practice for a variety of scenarios.
I wouldn't say it's been a regular practice to do that, but it is typical for us to block staircases, et cetera, during fire drills. The lockdown procedure is fairly standard for us. We have a lot more experience, unfortunately, with hold in place. Because we often have medical situations that need to be mitigated. So I wouldn't say it's a regular practice during a lockdown drill.
I mean, I would agree. Prior to a couple of years ago, we were practicing 12 fire drills a year for 12 years. Our kids were really good at fire drills. They still are. But I think these drills that we're doing right now, in addition to the fire drills, is getting the kids in the habit, in the practice. So I agree with Mr. Clark. We're pretty much, with the lockdown specifically, focusing on the exact, making sure that they're in the rooms, making sure that the lights are off, they're silent. We're continuing to practice that.
As an elementary school administrator, lockdowns make me a little uncomfortable. I know it's an important thing to practice for the staff, but then I'm also worried about unnecessarily frightening children. I don't want to do that. And so we kind of walk a fine line. When we have a drill, I get on the PA system and I walk people through it and I say, this is what we're going to do. And what I trust is that our staff is going to be thinking, and this is something we talked about at faculty meetings and grade level meetings and the like, that no matter how much you prepare specifically for different emergencies, there's always going to be that situation that's going to be a little bit out of the norm. There's going to be a little tweak to something, and the ability to think on your feet and do something that that makes sense to you based on the training you've had, but may be a little unique to that particular situation. And so my hope always is by doing the drills, the adults are thinking about, okay, what if I'm ever in a situation like this? What could I do? What other things could present themselves to me, and how might I work through those?
I would agree with all that has been said thus far, but I always think there's room for improvement, and I know that this is something that we've talked about as a cabinet of, just changing up the different types of things that we're doing, blocking hallways, blocking an exit, so that the adults have to be able to think on their feet. The other thing that I think is critical, especially for the elementary level, is the teach piece. Making sure that conversations are being had with kids about why we are doing these things, so that we're not scaring them and making them fear when we do have to use one of these drills.
Thank you. And we do have a number of questions, so again, I'll ask when the question is read from this point forward, if we could have one, maybe two people respond to this so that we can get as many of these answered as possible. The next one says, it has come to my attention recently that there is another issue regarding school safety. I was told some school officials are hesitant to place safety measures such as metal detectors, armed guards, new locking systems, etc., because of how it may look to potential home buyers or people considering relocating to the area. They fear it may hinder home sales, as people may see the area and school as unsafe. Have you ever encountered this in your decisions? Is it image versus safety? Is there someone who might like to respond to that, Bob?
I'll weigh in just from an administrative point of view. I think if I could just go back to what Mr. Concordia had said earlier, I think collectively, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we fundamentally believe the most important piece of that puzzle is the culture of our buildings. And I think if you could see, Fairport High School is the newest school to have a single point of entry. We're clearly interested in providing reasonable barriers for people to come in so that we can check backgrounds, et cetera. But the critical, most important piece for us that we are all concertedly working on is building connections with our kids every day and making them feel safe and telling us what's going on. That's how we find out most things that happen in our school, no matter what the issue is, whether it's writing on a bathroom wall, a student, concerned about hurting themselves, or something a little bit more serious. That's how we find that stuff out.
Thank you.
If I were looking for a house and with all this going on and increasing volume all the time, I would find the extra security a plus on one end and the home buyer in the other.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. This next one, actually, there's a few questions that I think I can put together into one, where it's asking about the various schools and what is being done to ensure that the facilities, the main entrances, the delivery entrances are secure during the school day. Someone has commented that they've seen wide open doors. And again, there's another question that says what's being done to improve the physical security at the specific buildings. So again, if someone would like to comment on some of those measures that are being taken, appreciate it.
Well, I think this is our third year of having the single point of entry, at least at all the schools except for Fairport High School this past year. We've got the Raptor system. I mean, from once the first period begins, the only way anyone gets in the building, unless they've got a district fob, is through the main office. And we're pretty diligent with that, from 7:55 till 2:40. I mean, that really is the only way in for a parent. At 2:40, of course, when we have all the extracurricular activities, then there's other areas to get into. But I know that our secretaries, the women in the front, are trained in terms of how to answer a response, how to maybe contact an administrator if someone's trying to gain access into the building from out at the buzzer, and they're just there's some things that they're not feeling good about. So I know we do have that level of training. We're not just letting everybody in. If there's any question, they'll contact an administrator, and the administrator will then take care of the discussion to see whether they come in.
I'll speak to that real quick. I just want to be patient for Dave and not command too much of this stuff. Obviously, Fairport High School is the biggest of buildings within the district and has the most doors. Because we have an open campus for lunchtime for our students, clearly that presents a different challenge for us. We've gone through a number of changes as a result of us reviewing our plans. When we did the single point of entry in the front of the building, we had a lot of collaborative conversations with the superintendent, Board of Education, the architects, et cetera, to change the scope of the back of the building. There is a new sentry desk there. It's manned by adults all day long. And the primary people that come in and out of that door are students. There are other safety protocols in place. For example, staff are required to wear badges. Construction workers when they're in the building, everybody wears picture IDs. And so part of our training is to recognize when people are in the building that don't have those protocols to make sure that they're not in the building. You know, I don't think as a rule that's something. I don't think that as a rule that's something that has come up. I think that you know, I think what we've looked at is in terms of the scope of the building, what are the things that we can control, and when the only time we pull back those privileges is when we feel that there's a safety hazard on the roads.
If I could just add one more thing, just related to that, because I know there have been situations. People, I don't know, maybe sometimes get complacent, or they might be careless or forgetful. Sometimes doors get left open when they shouldn't be, and sometimes just it's just human error. And I would say that all of us as administrators would say to all of you that if you see something like that, once again, we could use your cooperation with that kind of thing. And if you notice a door open, then let us know in the office, because sometimes we may not know about that. And then it is our job then to address that, you know, by making sure that it gets closed and see if we can figure out how did that get left open so we can make sure that that doesn't happen in the future.
Okay.
We'll take that feedback to the secretaries. They have a script, and they're not just supposed to let people in. So I'll certainly take that feedback. I'm not sure when you came in. There's certain parts of the day where you got to stop stepping in, working around the lunches, and we'll just make sure that everybody that's letting people in have that same script. Good feedback.
And then Michelle has a question, but one thing I want to just reiterate, we're doing this so we can get information and feedback and learn. So good feedback. You know, we might not have like the answer, but I'm taking notes and I know they're receiving it. So, sir, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So far I've heard about the EIT team, prevention, risk assessment, behavior intervention. What are we prepared to do when a guy shows up front door, decides he wants to go in with a gun and hurt our kids? What are we prepared to do? That's what we're here to talk about. It's great that we want to help people who have issues, who are stressed out and all that. But at the end of the day, there's an epidemic that is going around our great country. Our kids are dying. We have to recognize that. We got to do something about it. And with all due respect to everybody here talking about it, enough is enough. We got to stop the threat right at the door. No intercom service system is going to prevent it. No one standing by the door is going to prevent it. We got to stop the threat. Whether it's having a police officer there 8 hours a day, walking through the school twice a day is not enough. We need a presence there. Someone's going to stop the threat from coming into the school, hurting our kids. And we're not talking about that right now. We have to recognize the threat. Be realistic. You got to open your eyes. Kids are dying. Let's not have it happen here. A couple of years ago, we just had a kid right here in the village, somewhere in the village. explosive devices. The threat is real. We have to be prepared. And talking about it, it's not going to do it. We got to take action. We have to have somebody at the school every day, at every school. I'm not saying that's the total answer, but if the guy comes out with a gun, at least you have a chance. You have a chance. Maybe it's too expensive to have a police officer there 8 hours a day, but you can hire a guard. A minimum amount of money. So, I mean, what price do we put on the safety of our kids? I go to school, I go to work every day, and I think of my kids, and I pray every day, oh my God, oh my God. I mean, we have to recognize, it takes a police officer an average of 5 minutes to get to a call. A handgun, semi-automatic. If you're somewhat trained, 180 bullets, you can discharge 180 rounds per minute. AR-15, 400. We need to recognize it. We need to stop it. We need to take care of our kids.
Sam, do you have
So, yeah, I was going to, I appreciate your concern, sir, and it's on everybody's mind. But we are doing something, and that's what we're here to talk about. If we're reacting to something, as you say, someone coming to the school, it's too late. That's why we have set up these protocols to address this. If you look at the research and you look at what's happened in the past, the problem is all the telltale signs were there, but nobody reacted to them. So that's where we have to be preventative. That's where we have to be aggressive in understanding these telltale signs and addressing them before it happens. If we're addressing it at the doors, we're way too late. So that's the protocol. However, if it gets to that point, like you said, we are prepared, trained, equipped to address that situation.
A direct line of communication between the school and the fire and the police department?
Absolutely. Absolutely. On a daily, the cell phone, I have direct contact with the superintendent on a daily basis.
And I'm talking about having a rate.
I'll tell you, sir, it's very quick. Communication is incredible, and we address things. I could tell you story after story after story of what's going on a daily basis. I just want to reassure you that we are prepared from law enforcement standpoint, but the point is we need to be preventative and not reactive. And that's where we need to be as
Totally agree. However, when it hits the fan, somebody's got to be there. You don't have to.
I appreciate what you're saying. I don't know, Mark, if there's anything more that.
No.
I think your thoughts
Yep.
are well taken. I'm hearing you. I appreciate the opportunity to follow up with you on a more personal level. I appreciate it, and like I said, I'm hearing you 110%. So, Mr. Henschel, can you please continue?
Yeah, Captain Bell, you had referred to earlier, just for clarification purposes, and I think this goes along a little bit with what you're saying too, Chief Farina, about a key fob. Can you just talk a little bit about what that meant? 'Cause some people didn't quite know what that meant, that you were equipped with key fobs, and how that plays into the situation of responding.
The district provided, sorry about that. The district provided us with 25 key fobs that we put on each of our key rings to all the cars that the deputies use. The key fobs will get us into any school in the Fairport district through any door. It's just a level of quick access to the building that the district provided us with.
Okay.
So, just to add to that, the administration has the ability to lock all of the doors with one press of a button, so that all fobs are disabled, except for the fobs that the sheriff's office or Fairport has. So that, again, teachers, anyone that would get their hands on a fob, they would not work at that time. The only ones that would work were at the sheriff's office.
And a follow-up question to that is, we spoke about the different levels of threat and threat assessment process. And this question says, when will the community, or how would the community be notified what the level of threat would be, or, where is that appropriate along the way?
So if something were to take place and we were to understand a threat level, I mean, there's going to be immediate communication in conjunction with the superintendent's office here at the school district as to what's going on. So the family would be notified as soon as it's practical to do so, and that communication is going to happen quite quickly. But it's going to be a joint communication between law enforcement and the school district as to the changes in the threat, or if there's any problems, concerns, issues going on within the school.
Is the district considering allowing teachers to have weapons, is a question.
No, we're not considering that.
Thank you. Talking a little bit about some of the mental health pieces here. It says that, while this is a big undertaking with many school districts and stakeholders, what's the #1 item on the agenda and how will it be implemented? And how can we as parents follow along? Are there deadlines in place that the committee is dedicated to be completing and to meeting? And I think that is talking about our threat assessment team and moving forward.
As cases are presented to us, we would be working with the law enforcement, with the Office of Mental Health, with any community agency that's deemed appropriate to step in at that point and processing the case and eliminating the threat in the sense of, getting in there and providing resources and partnering with families to, bring the student back down that ladder that Mark was referring to earlier. So we want to bring the student back down from that planning stage, from that, that point of where they've reached their threshold and, provide services and supports. And Kim is on this panel for that very reason, because she has a lot of power, in the county in terms of and helping us, because we know we run into barriers for accessing mental health supports for some of our students and families simply because of the volume of needs out in the country and furthermore closer to us in our county. And Kim has the ability to talk with us, and we can talk with her about how critical it is or where the threat is and how severe it is, so that she can make connections with, with Strong Hospital in terms of getting, inpatient care and so forth for anyone that might, be at that level. So, and Kim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your role on that, the team that you sit on countywide.
We'd be here all night. No one wants that. I think the emphasis mental health-wise is the earlier recognition, the better. I mean, as soon as the students, the parents, the friends, the peers, anyone is noticing a change in that kid's behavior, the sooner that it's brought forward, the sooner that we're able to intervene, the less likely that there is going to be an incident at that front door. So I think as far as mental health, we have a plethora of services in Monroe County, even though we also have a plethora of children. But there are a lot of kids that we, unfortunately, across the county aren't intervening in until later on in the spectrum. So I think I can't emphasize enough, the sooner that you can bring any change. The child didn't get lunch today. The child didn't do their homework. The child came in not looking as well groomed as usual. Those are all changes that could be very impactful and could mean a lot. So the sooner you can relay that, the better.
Just a quick comment. The concept of a behavioral intervention team or a threat assessment team has a large toolbox. Mental health is at the table, the school district is at the table, law enforcement is at the table. And depending on the severity of the threat, obviously if it's an imminent threat, that's acted upon quickly and appropriately. But as the threat begins to accelerate, or we feel that there's a cluster of factors that accelerate the threat, that's why we have the Sheriff's Department and SAM at the table too, because then you can increase safety measures at a school if you need to do so. Law enforcement is one part of the multifaceted approach, and they bring a lot of tools to bear. That's why it's multidisciplinary, integrated systems. So it's not simply just, of course we want to get the earliest recognition that we can. And we want to get the resources to those people that need the help. But if that threat is beginning to accelerate, or the warning or the proximal warning behaviors are there, we do have the necessary people at the table to say, okay, maybe this is what we need to do from a hardening the target perspective, or maybe we can put a police officer out there for a week or two. This is the fluidity of a threat assessment team. So it's not just, we talk about restorative and we believe in that, but it's also actionable.
Thank you. One of the questions was about social media and the use of phones in schools. So someone asked about, do we really need to have phone usage in schools? Could that help curtail the situation? And a follow-up to that was, social media seems to be a large indicator. When filters are in place in our school district, what filters are in place, in our school district to isolate at-risk behavior? Do any filters include use of social media on school grounds? Yep, we have Tom Devitt, who is our Director of Technology, and so is this.
Yep, we have a number of filters that are used across the Monroe County.
the same filters that are in place for all the schools, we subscribe to as well. It's a difficult beast because most of the kids that have phones have data plans. So knowing which kids are on which networks and being able to be preventative is not a perfect scenario or thing we can manage. So the filters themselves work with a nightly service that categorizes websites, and we have them all blocked by categories, and those sites are updated nightly. So that service isn't perfect. We have to keep an eye on it. We have alerts that we watch, and then we also have a lot of false positives. So we'll have a lot of websites that are instructional in nature that have to be unblocked because they were categorized that night. Well, they were available yesterday, but why is it blocked again? Well, because it's a dynamic system. So we do our best, and that's how that works.
I just like to say something sort of related to that, just because it's something that's really been on my mind a lot this year. I think that at this point, when it comes to social media, period, in terms of what happens in our culture with our kids, that for parents who have kids who are underage, who are using technology, I believe that it is imperative that you know everything that happens with your child on social media, and if you don't, then don't give them access to social media, because it really is a hidden culture that happens with kids. And and all of us want to be good parents. We want, if we see something happen, we want to correct it. We want to let them know that's not okay to talk not nice to somebody, that kind of thing. But what happens with social media is that it happens anonymously and in another world, a world outside of our experience, unless we're actively pursuing finding out what is happening there. And it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of know-how. And if you don't have the time or the know-how, then really the answer is don't allow your children to get on social media. I think it's the biggest challenge to parenting these days.
I understand that, but like they've done an amazing job at school there, which I'm sure a lot of people didn't know, with having phones and kids access to them. The question was, are you considering not having phones in the schools?
I'll take that one in terms of the high school perspective. I think that what we try to do is strike a balance there, and I think that each teacher has varying viewpoints on what their responsibility is regarding technology, and for many students it's a tool. It's a tool for learning, and I think we feel an obligation to prepare our students to use technology in an appropriate way. I think as a school we try to demonstrate that through the way that we choose to use social media. No, I'm answering your question. The answer is no. I have not considered banning technology from the building. What we have done is made a concerted effort to teach responsible use of technology.
Yes, sir, you have a question. Yeah. As a career contractor, I think about things mechanically. As I was pulling up to the school, I was wondering what mechanically, architecturally are we doing to our schools to make them safe? So, I look at these glass doors and I think about how many seconds it would take to, even a secured door, to be inside. With guns the way they are nowadays, I don't know, there has to be a safety rating, I would think, on entrances. It's great that we're securing all the entrances as far as keeping them locked, but then I think about how many seconds would it take for a shooter to get into a locked door, if it's glass, if it's not bulletproof glass, if it's a wooden frame door, if it's a metal frame door. What's being done to make our buildings more secure? And what is the plan for moving forward to make them secure?
Kev, can I just take that one just because we've gone through that process recently. And I will tell you that in terms of like the collaboration on the process, I was able to work with the architects to talk about what the front of our building would look like, and understanding that there are so many doors. And so to your point about the mechanics and how it would function, as a result of those collaborations and working with Mr. Provenzano and our team, we created a situation where they are locked between doors. So they gain entrance through the video on the outside, and then they're locked between those doors while we go through the Raptor system. But that's a new process, and that's from looking at schools all over the county and how they're implementing that procedure. But that's the kind of collaboration that's going on through this process to ensure that we do have safe practice. Are we 100% there? Absolutely not. And quite honestly, we're not a fort. We're an educational institution. We're not police officers. We're educators. And so our primary responsibility is, I totally understand. I have 3 children myself, sir. Yeah?
My children have gone through this Fairport School District, and God, thank God, it was a safe experience.
Certainly.
Now I have grandchildren.
Mhm.
That's why I'm sitting. It's going to be years before they're in these schools, but I want to know that at least I've said something.
Yes.
Brought their attention. What can we do to make the facility, the building structure, more safe, or as safe as we possibly can?
And I think through that process of collaboration, of working with the building principals, the architects, as we move through, you know, of late, if you weren't party to this, we spent a lot of time talking about our district advisory committee and what our facilities look like in the 21st century. And, you know, Mr. Dunn in the back row there, he participated in these conversations, having conversations about security and what that looks like and how we implement that in future projects. So I think we have the opportunity to have input in that, and I think that our concerns of the day are party to that conversation. So it's definitely on our mind.
With regard to security, there's a couple questions here I think we can lump together. We do have sentries in some of our buildings, and so the question is about their role and are they armed? Dave?
Our sentry is Kim Kuchera. She's a mother of 4 boys. Her role is to connect with the kids, be eyes and ears throughout the school. She's not armed, but I don't think we want her armed. She's really there to make connections with kids, to let us know, counselor's main office, what she hears, what she sees. With these connections, kids come to her. And we're lucky in Fairport because we do get information. I can't say we get it all the time. We got enough kids out there that they know that when they hear something that doesn't sound right, that they get to someone that can make some change. So from our standpoint, our security is just a connector, eyes and ears, making relationships with kids.
And I'll just echo those comments. We have 5 sentries here. Sentry is kind of an awkward title because, you know, I would speak about one of our sentries that just retired after 20-something years in our building. Sentry was the least of his responsibilities. They're culture people, and they're here to build connections with kids. They know many more kids' names than most of our teachers because they're in the hallways and they're with kids every day, 180 days a year. And they're you know, talking about early warning indicators. They're the ones that come to the administrators and say, so-and-so is having a bad day, so-and-so needs someone to talk to. That's the role that they play here. So they do a lot of jobs. They might sit at the single point of entry desk and check people in. They might sit in the back of the building and check IDs. They might do that kind of stuff. They escort students when we're calling them to the office and whatnot. But no, we don't have any conversations about arming them. We do have some retired police officers, so they have experience in that industry, and they provide support in that regard. They give us some perspective, but their main job is to build connections with kids. Yes, they all have radios.
And along the same lines, maybe Chief Farina, Captain Bell, you can answer this for us in your experience. Some people have commented and said that there are certain schools, such as the city schools, who don't have issues like Parkland. They search bags, have metal detectors. Some of them have armed guards. Shouldn't Fairport use these best practices? And why wouldn't we consider using those particular methods and practices?
I would defer to the school district to make those decisions. We have, I think we have a better partnership here at the Fairport School District with law enforcement. I believe the sheriff's office has the same thought process there, and if there's a need for additional security or additional needs of the police department, they have immediate access to us. We're not the city school district, we're the Fairport School District, and that seems to work very well for us here.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, there's such an emphasis on keeping the students safe inside the school. what are the safety protocols in place for when the students are outside of the school and grounds? And that talks about not only during, for example, PE classes, for example, as well as during recess and students on the playgrounds.
All of our PE teachers have radios, and of course, in a lockdown, they are not coming back into the building, so we can communicate with them accordingly. They're going to go to the nearest safe area, depending on where they are in their sporting event. When we do lockout drills, we'll sometimes give them information whether to come in or stay out, depending on the scenario that we're showing. But again, I feel at least comfortable that we're in communication with all of our phys ed teachers as they're out on the grounds for their phys ed classes.
Can you talk a little bit about other events where the students are outside in mass exposed, like fire drills and going to buses? I'm worried it's only a matter of time before one of these psychos realizes that that's the best opportunity to do the most things. Is there any planning or anything around those events when everybody's outside? I could speak. I mean, generally, like all of our athletic events are supervised by as many adults as we can staff. Fire drills are staffed by sentries, all of the teachers that are out there with their classes. We shut down traffic coming in and out of the building so that we can conduct a drill. You know, those are some of the protocols that we follow to keep them out. I mean, in terms of people driving by the street, no. We share your worry. You know, every time there's a massive movement of students in the building, we're concerned. And so our biggest weapon in that regard is visibility and communication.
I would also just add that during fire drills or any type of anything where we have to all be outside of the building, we have post commanders, and they all have radios, and their job is to report that every classroom is out safely and kids are accounted for. And if we have a child that's at the nurse's office, say, we are in constant communication over the radio so that we know where all of those kids are at all times.
And I think that question gets to the heart of why we're here tonight, the main thing that we wanted to talk about, because there are all kinds of physical interventions or precautions that we could take as we try to outguess the next person who might want to do harm to multiple people. And it might mean having bulletproof safe rooms in the corner of every classroom. If you've seen that, I've seen that on social media. I actually do look at social media. You know, there are numerous. You know, you could put those. Actually, a student asked me about this. You know, could we have those things where the thing comes down on the windows to close them off? You know, like metal. You know, and I think you know, as we look at the Parkland shooting, there was stuff that the person was very thoughtful about it, knew how the system worked, and used the system against itself to do this. And that's why there are steps that we can take that might help predict and guard against some of that stuff. But the most important place that we can put our resources in is in this kind of work that we're talking about tonight, which is the prevention of it in the first place. And using these great resources that we do have in this community in a way that we haven't used them before. We've always had these really great resources, but we haven't talked to each other as well as we are doing now with this behavior intervention team. This is our best chance at heading off something like that, that we all believe that. And that's the reason why we're talking tonight.
I just want to make one comment. I worked law enforcement for 22 years. I worked counterterrorism for 13. We had a saying in the counterterrorism world is that every time we build a wall, they build the ladder a little higher. We built the wall, they built the ladder a little higher. The concept here being is that individuals who are committed to this type of violence, their commitment is rational. They're not. This is a rational choice for them. They well plan this out. That's why we talk about the pathway to violence when they reach the research and planning and breach and preparation stages. And I'm not dismissing any of the. I have two children in school, but I understand that no matter what we try to do in terms of hardening our targets, and we should have those discussions and we should consider those. When somebody has that type of last resort thinking, who is committed to this type, no matter what we do, there's going to be some loss of life. So that's why I'm such a proponent. And again, I've worked this for 22 years. I worked terrorism. I worked premeditated targeted violence. This is the best method. Get it before it happens. Mitigate the threat. Keep a line of sight on the individual from the moment they manifest. when we determine that the threat to be substantive to the moment they're no longer in our environment. That's the key to threat assessment in a behavioral intervention team. You don't lose sight. You don't fall through the cracks. You harden the targets when you need to. Again, I don't even look at the stuff that's at my daughter's school because I know these individuals are going to be able to breach that in a moment if they really wanted to. So that's, I mean, again, I did this for 22 years. We build a wall, they build a ladder. We build a wall, they build a ladder. So that's why we, in counterterrorism, it wasn't about prosecution, it was about prevention. We just had to try to mitigate the threats and prevent them any way we could. And this type of violence is just another form of that.
I would like to just, we'll have one more question, and the question reads, will there be a website to help parents educate their kids on the program? We will have, firstly, these questions that we have not answered, answered to the best of our ability as we move along. We'll put them on our website. As we talk about intentionally engaging with our children, I think continuing these conversations, empowering parents so they have the tools to have these conversations, I think that's a great idea. I said in the beginning, we don't have all the answers, but we're listening and we're trying to learn. I know Mr. Clark mentioned our District Advisory Council. One of the pieces or one of the priorities was safety. As we talk about the futures of our schools, as we talk about what are we going to do with our next plans, safety will be at the top end of that. Looking at our schools, looking at the widgets. I got to tell you, being superintendent, I have the blessings of getting all the emails, and I do my best to try to read them. And you should see all what I have spent already on all the great ideas that are out there. And there's lots of great ideas out there. I think we need to be intentional, we need to be thoughtful and planful in how we move forward. As a parent, these questions, your advocacy, the heart and your passion, I share that. My wife shares that as well. And that's why we're doing this tonight, because I know this is important to our community, to our families, to moms and dads and grandparents and family members alike, to our esteemed guests in the front. I am grateful that you came up here and you had the opportunity to interact with our community. So can I please have a round of applause? My commitment is to continue this conversation in different forums and different venues, and I look forward to communicating our next steps. I look forward to looking at these questions and our processes. So thank you very much. I'll be here if you want to ask me questions. Thank you very much.
Just one thing that all of us have a question mark. So bottom line, there's not going to be any armed guards in Fairport, right?
Armed guards?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, that question, I don't, like armed guards, like armed staff? No. We haven't processed that. We haven't processed that, but we're listening and we're learning. We haven't processed it. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry.